Welcome to Diary of a Sales Engineer, where the world of technology, sales, and strategy collide. I'm Ryan Kruger, and along with my co host, Samir Kasser, we're here to take you on a journey through the daily adventures, challenges, and triumphs of being a sales engineer in today's fast paced tech landscape.
Hey everyone, I'm Samir Kasser. Together we'll uncover the secrets to success, navigate through industry insights, and explore the personal side of being a sales engineer, discussing life, career development, and what it takes to break into and thrive in this exciting field.
Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting out, this podcast is your source for candid experiences, practical advice, and insider tips. We sit down and have real conversations about all things sales engineering, like how to do discovery, demo best practices, and even how to survive having your calendar get double booked by your reps.
So grab your headphones and get ready to dive into the diary of a sales engineer.
All right, let's get it started. This is episode one, how to break into sales engineering. So, Samir, I think the best first question for you would be, how did you break into sales engineering and when did you break into sales engineering?
Yeah, so right after college, I didn't know sales engineering existed. I did undergrad with computer engineering and a minor in business. Always wanted to be in between business and technology. And my 21-year-old self thought that was writing ERP software for a company called Workday. A few years in, I wasn't super happy about it, was doing work, wasn't really enjoying it as much, and talked to a couple of the higher ups at my company after hearing one of our um, business responses on like how we're approaching to scale the company. And he told me, hey, you should look into pre-sales. Didn't know what pre-sales was at the time. Did some more research. I was like, oh, it's very interesting. There is a technical component where I could leverage my technical knowledge. And then there was also a sales component where you're presenting and you're in front of an audience. And so at the time, this is now fall of 2018, I started talking to the pre-sales reps who were at Workday, trying to get involved with the leadership team over there in order to get my name out and hopefully try to transition. There was an accelerator program at Workday that was very much like a mini MBA where they had 3,000 people apply and they would take a cohort of 10 to 15 folks every year for a 9-month accelerator in order to learn everything you need to know about enterprise pre-sales. And I was trying to position myself to apply for that. In the winter time around December of 2018, I found out that the next cohort in America wasn't going to come until 2021 or 2022. And at this point, I was like, I'm not really willing to wait 3 years to transition. And so I started thinking about a different strategy. I learned that the last step of the interview process was actually a why Workday pitch. And Workday had a bunch of these rooms where you could record yourself, doing a presentation. And so I developed a pitch. I got into the process of recording it. By this point, we are in March of 2019. And I actually recorded the pitch with the idea of being, I'm going to just send this to the hiring managers asking for feedback, uh, just to get it on their radar. And when the role opens up, they would have someone be like, hey, there was that developer. Maybe we can bring him in to interview him. And that way I could kind of get some exposure. Coincidentally, around that same time, a recruiter on LinkedIn reached out to me for a sales engineering role at a company called Automation Anywhere. Had never heard of Automation Anywhere, never heard of robotic process automation, did my research, turned out to be a very interesting space. Workday Ventures, Workday's investment arm, also had invested in Automation Anywhere, and that was a big, strong signal to me. And so I ended up taking the interview. Now we're in April, May time. I think I went through 3 or 4 on-site in-person interviews, described the work I was doing at Workday. One of the part of my interview, my hiring manager, he had asked me, what have you developed? And I remember diagramming the chart of pretty much the object graph of how things were connected and why we were making a change to improve the efficiency of a particular piece of code. And ultimately being able to describe a very technical thing to someone who is not really within the same business in a way that was simple, I think got me the job. And so June of 2019, I transitioned over from a software engineer to a sales engineer, and been doing that ever since. And started my way at a 1,000 person, 60 person sales engineering team, and now at a company that builds software for sales engineers. So it's been quite the journey.
Okay, all right. So there's lots to unpack there. I mean, I think the first thing that probably jumps out to me is you are pretty much switching industries and careers within this change that you've done, right? You've gone from being a software engineer into being a sales engineer. I would consider those to be very different roles at an organization. What have you noticed that are the biggest differences between those roles, and what do you like and maybe don't like?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference is your day to day. I think as a sales engineer, your day to day is very dynamic in the sense that you could have a day where you're doing a bunch of prep for a POC, or you could have a day where you're on back-to-back demos, or you could be hopping on a plane and getting ready to go work a booth at a conference and nail down your 1 minute, 2 minute elevator pitch. So the dynamisty of sales engineering is starkly different from the dynamisty of software engineering, where it was, we were an agile company, so we had 2 week sprints. So every other Thursday was sprint planning, and then we had to get our work done on a certain cadence. And so it almost became kind of repetitive. I knew what I was getting into every day, and not didn't really have as much change as I wanted to. And I think there's pros and cons to that. There's some folks who really like the routine and doing the same thing each day that really brings them peace. For me, I like the constant change. My brain likes to think about new problems to solve and new ways to approach it. And then the biggest difference is I was only interacting with my immediate team as a software engineer. As a sales engineer, I'm interacting with the customer, I'm interacting with prospects, the CEO of our company, leadership team on both sides, product development, marketing, sales. We're interacting with everyone, and I really prefer that interaction amongst, in comparison to just being within my own little pod as a software engineer.
Okay, so it seems like being customer facing is probably something that's like a big difference there, that you enjoyed. What about from the software engineering side? Was there any skills that you think are really helpful to your role as a sales engineer now?
Oh, absolutely. I think a lot of the skills that I developed as a software engineer, I still use today. In fact, that has helped me secure jobs in the past, is being able to have that knowledge. A simple one is even being able to call APIs, right? Basic API scripts as an SC. It's very valuable when you're able to do that yourself and not having to go and tap on someone else just because now I can run just a little bit faster. I think also being able to understand the technical complexities. Being a software engineer, you've had to do it yourself to a certain degree, and you understand why certain things take longer than others. And having that experience allows me to empathize and understand from the development team, hey, like, why is this technically complicated? How is the architecture of our product designed in such a way to make this from the outside seem like a seemingly simple task be very complicated, because maybe the underlying architecture has various different layers that you just don't see. And so having that insight allows you to really understand why things are the way they are, and then being able to translate that to your sales rep and to your customer in a way that is digestible and can, build goodwill amongst all parties.
So during my time in consulting, there was a phrase that I don't know if I heard it somewhere, or I honestly have no idea where I got this phrase from, but I love this saying, you never want to call someone's baby ugly.
Yeah.
And I think about that a lot when I'm either even on the sales engineering front quite a bit when I'm consulting someone on what their current process looks like. You always have to remember and keep it in the lens that somebody has spent a ton of time working on building and developing what their process is today that they're coming to you and trying to solve. So it's a fine line of, especially on the sales front, of telling someone's baby that it's ugly, right? So even though it might seem crazy to you what you're hearing, there is an art form to how to actually articulate that and say, hey, look, what you've been doing today is great. It's gotten to you where you're at today, but we want to fix some of those things because of X, Y, and Z versus just being like, oh my God, I can't believe you guys are doing it that way. That's horrible.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, like as a sales engineer, you're never going to sell a lot of software doing it that way. But it was just something I learned, and I find that to be in a more interesting sort of piece of the role is we do have to take on this consultative approach in a lot of different circumstances that we're in. And so I think it's a good phrase to keep in the back of your mind as a sales engineer is like, don't call someone's baby ugly. Because if you
Yeah.
do, you might actually offend the wrong person. And there it
Very
is. You
deal.
might never get on a call with them again.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you were in consulting. Like, what was your journey into coming into sales engineering, and like, how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you this. I think my journey into sales engineering is a very unique one in the sense that throughout my life, I always wanted to do something like sales engineering, but I never knew what that was. And so I went to school and I studied something called geological engineering. And as I was going through that process in college, I was interested in a lot of the different things I was learning, but I never felt like a great fit for me. And the one story that I love to tell is I know the exact day that I knew I was never going to be a geological engineer was I had gone out one of my classes for geology. We were going and looking at rock somewhere over in Duluth, Minnesota, which is like one of the coldest places I have ever been to my entire life. And I remember one of my colleagues picked up a rock off the ground and he licked it and said, oh, I know exactly what mineral this is. And at that point, I was like, wow, my geological engineering career is over. I am never going to pick up a rock off the ground and simply just lick it. So I always knew that there were going to be better geological engineers. And being an athlete myself, like I always like to strive to be the best. And at that moment, I knew there was always going to be somebody a little bit more passionate and dedicated than myself. So I left school and again, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew geological engineering probably wasn't the route for me. I had a family friend reach out to me at the time, somebody that we tailgate with for the Chicago Bears games. And he's like, hey, why don't you come work for me and do some analytics? And at that point, I'm like, all right, I'm good at math. I can see that. He was doing an accounting process. And first day on the job, he looks at me and says, do you know how to code? Transparently, no, I don't know how to code, but I'm pretty savvy on YouTube. So if you want, like, I'll spend 8 hours a day on YouTube and I'll try to teach myself how to write some basic code for you. So I ended up teaching myself how to write SQL on YouTube and ended up building a really successful project that solved for Medicare bad debts in the healthcare industry. Um, Eventually, I ended up moving over into IT consulting. There's a whole nother story there too, which Samir, I know you know, but we'll talk about that in a different podcast because I think that is
Yeah,
one of the
that's
truly more unique moments in my career. But I moved over into IT consulting and I was enjoying it a lot more. Similarly to you, I didn't love the developing of software because it was just me, myself, and my laptop. And I'm a pretty big personality. So it just wasn't a fit for me. When I got into consulting, there was a lot more client interactions, which I really appreciated, but there were still so many days and weeks that it was just me, myself, and I behind the computer. So it still didn't feel like a fit for me. But the challenge there was I felt like I was at an impasse in my career where now I had already dedicated a few years into technology, but it still didn't feel like the right thing for me. And so I'm there and I'm starting to see the pathways of where I go from being a technical business consultant. And the next piece is being a project manager. And just project management just didn't have any interest to me. And so I'm starting to really evaluate my career and try to figure out where is it that I want to go. And I'm now feeling lost. And I'm starting to think, man, did I do the wrong thing? Should I have maybe gone back and done the geological consulting thing? But I don't want to restart my career. And one day I'm having lunch with one of my friends and we're sitting down and he's asking me how work's going. And I'm telling him a lot about what I'm doing at work. And he says, hey, man, I work with these people called sales engineers. I think you would make a great sales engineer. Have you ever heard of it? No, tell me more. And he starts going into about what a sales engineer is and does. And at that point, the way I like to describe it is it was the cartoon moment where the light bulb goes up above your head and it sparks on. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly what it is I was supposed to be doing. And so at that moment, I figured I need to break into this career. No matter what it takes, this is what I need to be doing. And so I spent the next, oh, wow, probably 8 or 9 months trying to break into sales engineering. Now, this was right at the start of COVID. And so that did not help anything at all, especially as jobs were being cut and there were less job openings out there for somebody to take a chance on someone breaking into sales engineering. So, one challenge that I faced was this idea of every single job I applied to had at the very bottom qualifications 3 to 5 years of experience as a sales engineer. Now, in my time as a consultant, I was actually working on the opposite side of the buying process, evaluating technology. And I was always giving presentations as a consultant too. So I felt like it was a really good role to break into sales engineering. It's definitely a role I would tell a lot of people if you're interested in breaking into sales engineering, I think it's a good one to go down because you get a ton of experience that sales engineers are already doing and working on. But at that point, I'm applying to all these jobs. I apply to like over 140 jobs that I get rejected from, constant rejection. Sometimes you never hear anything back. It's a frustration. One time back in, I want to say about a year ago, I heard from one of those jobs. It had already been 3 plus years. And they said, "Hey, Ryan, you didn't get the job." Shocker. I'm so surprised I didn't get this job I applied to 3 years ago. But it's just a frustration of, I think, overall the job market, how we hire, and the fact that pretty much the second you submit your resume, it's a black box that you have no control over. But I end up eventually breaking into sales engineering with Oracle NetSuite, where I go into a solution consultant academy with 19 other individuals. So there's 20 of us in this program where now they're going to teach us how to be a solution consultant or sales engineer. And Samir, I know you had a post a couple of weeks ago on LinkedIn that said, right, in pre-sales, we have solution consultant, sales engineers, pre-sales consultant. There's a few other names for the title. They are all the same thing. But I spent 7 months going through a program where they got us live, taught us how to be a sales engineer, the ins and outs. Truly one of the best experiences I've ever gone through in my working experience. Met some amazing individuals there. And also, too, I learned the basic and fundamentals of how to be a sales engineer, which really set me up for ultimately the next job that I got into and how to use those skills effectively.
Yeah, that's an awesome story. I think some overlaps between the two of us. Didn't know what sales engineering was until, relatively deep into our career. I mean, we're not super long, we're less than 10 years in our career, but at least halfway through our careers was when we discovered sales engineering was a thing. And I think I had that similar light bulb moment of, oh wow, this day to day is actually what I like and what I'm looking for. I think another thing that you said that kind of stood out is the ability to see the skills that you were developing as an IT consultant and the work that you did with your first job, and how does that transition over to like the valuable skills within sales engineering and being able to connect that dot and then being able to show that ultimately allowed you to, vent to your friend and your friend telling you that, hey, sales engineering actually
Mm-hmm.
describing that. So to people who are trying to figure out what they want, being able to describe what you like, and more importantly, what you don't like. Another thing I heard you say that I like resonated with was, I don't see myself as someone who's gonna pick up a rock and lick it. Like, I'm not gonna go and do that. I know that, and I like had similar thoughts around, being in front of a computer all day and creating something and not talking to people. So I think, being able to have those internal conversations and like being real with yourself. Like, these are the things I'm like, this is what I don't like, this is what I'm good at, this is what I know I can get better at, and this is what I'm not gonna actually like. This is not even worth, pursuing and putting time investment in because it's not gonna happen.
I think the challenge for most people, and including myself, right, even in the story I just told you there, is like when you are working in your career, you feel stuck at certain moments where you can't make a change, whether it's financially, whether it's just sort of these internal doubts that you have about making a change. But what I would suggest to anybody listening to this podcast is if you are unhappy in your current role and you are exploring something different that you are excited about, I would say run, don't walk towards it. Because the longer you continue to wait, the less likely you are to make a change. And you don't want to be 20 years into your career and miserable at your job saying, wow, I really wish I had done something or anything different than what I had chosen to do. Now is the moment to go and make something like that happen. I know there's a lot of fear there. I mean, you heard in my story, there was a ton of rejection that went into it. And I can tell you, there came a point in time where I went through an interview process with one company in Chicago, not to be named, but they had me interview with 7 different people. So 7 different interviews and a final demo presentation. Every time I got in the call with them, I said, I just want to make sure my experience is not the reason why I don't get this job. Of course not, Ryan. We love you. You're just awesome. You're killing it. Just keep on going forward. Get through to the very end. They tell me, Ryan, you didn't get the job. I said, what's the reason? They said, well, you don't have enough experience. Like, now, come on. I brought this up on every single call that I was with you on, and it was frustrating. And at that moment, I remember that night feeling as if I couldn't move forward anymore in my progress to become a sales engineer. I had told my wife I wanted to give up and not pursue it. I was like, you know what? I just think I need a couple month break. And at the time, my consulting job too was really wearing on me because I wanted this other thing so badly. It was making my current job harder and harder to do. But in that moment, that night, when I wanted to give up, I started hearing this voice inside my head saying, you can't. You know that this is the thing that you're supposed to be doing. You have to get up tomorrow and make it happen. And that's exactly what I did. I stopped feeling sorry for myself. I said, screw the rejection. I don't care if I continue to get rejected. I don't care how many more rejection emails I get. I'm just going to keep applying and applying. And eventually, somebody out there is going to meet me and want to give me this opportunity. And that's exactly what happened. So I would say don't let the rejection stop you from getting to ultimately what you want, because there's nothing worse than waking up at a job you don't like. And I can tell you, being in pre-sales now, I wake up excited every day to do my job. I really like the client interactions, the demos, the technical, the blend of being between teams. And it's something that actually wakes me up and gets me out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think another thing to keep in mind there is I feel like sometimes the interview process of rejection after rejection almost preps you for pre-sales because we are going to get rejected. We are going to lose deals. We're going to bust our ass, put in hours, if not weeks of time into this. And like at the end of the day, that deal gets lost. But to your point, you got to get back up. You got to keep going. And I think learning how to deal with rejection, whether it's from the job process or even losing deals, is something that you can't shy away from. Um, and it's that mentality of you're gonna get knocked down. That's fine. It's just what do you do after? Do you get back up or you stay down? And I think both of us are the type to wallow a little bit, go scream at the balcony for a bit, and then
Yeah.
get back up and continue on.
I
But
will
I
I will
think
say,
now,
like, complaining is a perfectly fine thing too. Like it's okay to complain in certain moments. I think there's probably like negative connotations around that, or some people would say like it's not the best thing in the world to do, which fine, fair. That's totally cool. But I do think like there's a moment to say like, wow, this company that had me go through all these interviews, like I'm allowed to complain about that. I had emphasized that I didn't want my experience to be the reason why I didn't get the job. I'm allowed to complain about it. But after I complained about it for a few moments, it's time to wake up, get back to work, and make it happen. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that individuals face right now,
yeah,
trying to break into the world of pre-sales, is this idea of the resiliency that it's going to take to make it happen. It's one of the harder job markets that we've seen. And getting these opportunities they're facing a lot of the same challenges today of you have to have experience to break into this role. So Samir, I know for you, your experience of getting into this role was a little bit different than mine, but I know that you are constantly working with a lot of individuals that reach out to you on LinkedIn. So what are some of the things that you're hearing today, and what's some advice that you would maybe give somebody that does reach out to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely similar experience than what you described. People have applied to hundreds and hundreds of roles and they are looking for 3 to 5 years, but these are just like entry level folks who are just trying to break into. So I hear that a lot. And I think a couple of the big things that I share with folks is, you have to figure out how to stand out at this point. And it's more than just putting your application into a job portal. You have to start being strategic. When you are as like an SC, AEs do this a little bit more, but some SCs, some of the more powerful ones do this where you'll do, account mapping. You'll start to understand, hey, I'm targeting this prospect. Here are the players that matter. This is my champion. This is someone who can help me understand what's going on, but the ultimate decision maker is this person. And being able to understand and know who that is allows you to tweak how you speak to them, tweak your messaging. You got to do something similar on in the job hunt. Most of the time you'll talk to a recruiter. That person might be your champion ish sometimes, depending on who they are. They can give you like, okay, hey, depending on how transparent or the type of rapport you build, hey, this is going to be the hiring manager. I've hired for them in the past. This is what they look for. Here's what you should focus on. I've had some recruiters, be homies like that with me and give me that little bit of an insight. And then using that information to then stand out with that hiring manager. LinkedIn is your friend. People are very open to talking. I think as long as you come with curiosity and not demands. So the difference is, hey Ryan, like really interested in what you're doing as a senior enterprise sales engineer. How is that different from an SMB sales engineer? Versus, hey
Mhm.
Ryan, I'm really interested in working at your company. Can you give me a rec? Like that's going to give you two different types of information and Ryan will be happy to share what's the difference between, an SMB rep and an enterprise rep and like getting into the kind of the nitty gritty. But he's going to be turned off when your random strangers like, hey, can I have something from you? So definitely use LinkedIn, but come with curiosity and not an ask. And I think the third thing I would say, if you're going for some of these larger companies, they have free trials of the product. Get your
Mhm.
hands on the product. A lot of the big companies also have free just like universities that you can go and learn the product, get a certification. Like, yes, this is a time investment, but on one end, if you do get the job, you're already going to be ahead when you already start. On the other hand, you'll be able to know what it takes to learn a new product. As an SC, whenever we go to a new company, regardless if I'm doing this for 30 years or just 2 years, I will have to learn a new product, how the sales motion works, what's the ins and outs of it. So being able to practice learning something new, especially learning on your own, I think it's a big differentiator amongst other potential SCs because when I'm looking to hire someone personally, when we were expanding teams at places, it was one of my biggest questions is, hey, you're trying to learn something new. What's your process?
Mm.
Doesn't even have to be a technology. I gave an example. I was like, hey, I wanted to change out my cold air intake in my car. How did I do that? What was the process? I wanted to go build something in my house. What was the process? I wanted to learn how to plant something.
YouTube, man. YouTube has
Yeah.
everything out there. Seriously, like it's one thing I do find to be a little bit frustrating too, especially as I've or what I've seen before is or talk to other individuals is that there's this idea or notion of like, I want to do X, Y, and Z. All right, what are you going to do to learn X, Y, and Z? Are you willing to put in the time on YouTube and find this stuff out or go to a master class? Or the internet is this amazing place that has infinite resources, especially now with AI too. Like there is pretty much no barrier to entry around what you can learn. It's just about the time and energy to do so. A lot of times I hear from people, I don't want to do that. I just want to get the job. Like, well, in order to get the job, you're going to have to do a few things. I mean, I'll tell you, like, one thing that helped me land the first opportunity in pre-sales was the fact that I did go through that summer and become Salesforce certified administrator. Salesforce offers Trailhead. It's all free. You can learn Salesforce entirely free online. And I spent the summer going through and finding out and getting that certification. That certification helped establish me for when I was in the interview process to say, how do you learn technology? Well, I learned technology by doing exactly this. I went, I found a technology out there, I learned it. I learned the ins and outs of CRM, how to build it, how to manipulate fields, custom fields, et cetera. And that was a big differentiator for me. I think one thing you said in there is something that I wish I had done, though, is the fact that I didn't do this kind of account management to find the ideal jobs that I was best suited for. I was just on LinkedIn, apply, 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 on Indeed, apply, 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 apply. And look, a lot of the times when you're doing that, you're immediately not a good fit because they already see that your resume is not tailored to the job. And so in sales engineering, especially as you do work for different companies, something that we talk a lot about is our ideal customer profile around what does the ideal customer look like, how to prospect the ideal customer. I would say the same thing goes into finding your first opportunity as a sales engineer, be like your ideal job profile is figure out what industry you are best suited for. So if you are coming from HR, guess what? Go look at an HR technology solution. If you are already working in cybersecurity as a project manager and you want to make the change into sales engineering, cybersecurity would be a pretty good route to go find that first opportunity. But if you're in cybersecurity today and then you say, hey, I want to actually work in payroll technology, those jobs are immediately going to filter you out because you don't have any relevant experience to say you're going to be really good at payroll. So it's something that I definitely didn't do. I was just going with the spray and pray sort of approach. I think that's a Call of Duty term. And it didn't work out for me, obviously. It was just a lot of rejection just due to the nature of the fact that I didn't sit down and actually figure out what the ideal job looked like for me.
No, that's a huge point, and I'm glad you brought that up. Is you need to find that overlap, especially when you're trying to break into sales engineering. I think we've talked about, both me and you on the site have talked about, there's three things that you need. You know how to sell, you need to know the technology, and you also have to have domain expertise. And in order to like break into an SC role, you need to at least have one of those things in order
Mhm.
to, have it's like a one hop over versus like a two hop or a three hop. And so that's a really great point. Look at the industry you're in and then find that commonality and that common ground, and that'll help you transition into an SC role. I think from a lot of things, I think domain expertise is kind of slept on when getting into sales engineering. Like, when we were working together, uh, your domain expertise from NetSuite, from that accounting background, was huge. And like, I learned so much from you because you had that domain expertise. And I think that's something that people think sales engineering is like, yes, the demo, the technology side, you're the technical advisor. But I think people underestimate the power of having really strong domain expertise.
Mhm.
Um, that's something I would encourage people to think about. What is the domain that you have a lot of expertise in? And then where are companies that are trying to service that domain?
I think one of the things that will differentiate a good sales engineer from a great sales engineer too is the different kinds of stories that you can weave. And it was something I really struggled with at the beginning of my career as a sales engineer because I went from, this technical background of building product and doing consulting work to now selling financial software, meaning I didn't have a lot of experience talking about the financial nature of things. So I was having a hard time figuring out these stories. And my manager at the time at NetSuite, he had actually sat me down. He's like, I think you have amazing stories to tell around building product and technology and consulting on it. Also, building a product that solved for a piece of accounting. And so when you're able to tell these kinds of personal stories of things that you've experienced in your life, it changes a demo from feeling very robotic because they're connecting with the person on the opposite side of the screen. Because you're telling him, hey, oh, in my experience, I saw something like this in the past. And you tell that story, and immediately your person on the other side of the screen is engaged in the story and they realize it's not a robotic demonstration. It's not the demonstration of the story you tell every time you're on a call because it's unique to what you heard them say. So it shows that you're listening, and you figure out how to tie those stories together. But when you can go from an industry into a similar industry, it's easier to pull those stories out and figure out how they relate versus taking these larger leaps on how to relate the stories. I think there is an art form to being able to do that, where I could talk about something in my development career that might still relate to the product I sell today. But doing that kind of storytelling is like level 2 or 3 storytelling versus, going from an HR product to an HR product and telling a story about your previous job to your next one. It's level 1 and saying like, hey, these two things are super similar. It's easy to pull out the story that relates there.
Absolutely. So if we were to, I guess, maybe wrap here and give some, I guess, maybe top three things of what, someone today is trying to get into sales engineering. I'll start with one. I think one, get your hands on the free trial of the product. Get your hands on the university. Go and become as much as a product expert as you can with all the free materials out there.
I would say 2 would be resiliency. I think right now is going to be one of the hardest times to break into this job. But if you feel like Samir or I felt originally, where that light bulb went off and you said, this is the thing I want to do, I would say be resilient. Be ready to face some rejection. Don't do what I did, though. Don't do the spray and pray. I would definitely target the industries and jobs that you're best suited for. Don't apply to just every job that's out there. Really sit down, figure out the 5 or 10 companies you want to work for, and start looking for those roles. Start networking with the people that are in those different companies. Get some insights there because I think that'll be really, really important. And the last piece of advice that I'll give, and then Samir, I'll let you wrap up with one more piece as well, is something that I think is really, really important. Is as you do make it into an interview cycle, is figure out how to tell the story about what you're doing today and how it would make you a great sales engineer. So, in my experience working as an IT consultant, I use those stories there to relate towards why I would be a good sales engineer. The consulting on business, the giving demonstrations. I pulled those stories out and used it in the interviews to help me be more successful, get past like the initial phone screenings into a hiring manager. I think it's super important, and probably an area that if you are looking for a job, it's an area you could focus on and definitely have it stand out as to why you'd be a good sales engineer without the experience piece.
Yeah. And my last point was going to kind of piggyback off of that is just lean into your domain expertise. We all are not coming out with nothing. We all have had life experiences previously. We've all had different roles, done different things, built different stuff. So lean into that, find your story, figure out how it will fit into the overall sales engineering message. Sales engineering is very dynamic, so I'm sure you'll be able to find one thing to attach onto. You just need that one thing to make that connection. And that'll show that, hey, you have the skill set, you have the tools to apply to another project. So I think with that, we'll wrap here for our first episode. Was a blast. Diary of a Sales Engineer. We're gonna be talking just candidly amongst each other. We'll be sharing some funny moments, some demo fails, some oops, I forgot to be on mute stories.
Oh.
So, Ryan, anything you want to add before we wrap here?
I would just say, we're trying this out here. If you want to hear us talk about something, shoot us a message, drop us a comment, something like that. Tell us what our next podcast should be. And, we're happy to riff on these different things. The goal is that, again, like Samir said, it's to be sort of this forum of our shared experiences on these different topics as it relates to sales engineering. And I think there's such a wide variety of different things for us to really dive into. So there is something that you're interested in hearing us talk about, let us know.
Awesome. All right. We'll see you guys next time.
See you next time. Diary of a Sales Engineer.